Take about 10 seconds. I'm coming back to you. And there we are. Hi, everyone. It's Sarithkin and Ontir, and I'm here with His Grace Hirsch from Calontir, who has graciously agreed to talk to me on my birthday. So thank you for that. So this is I made a challenge for myself last year and this year. And last year I didn't meet it, was to fight 50 Dukes. But so with the COVID thing, nobody's fighting anyone. So I decided to interview 50 Dukes. And you're actually number 52 because I'm having so much fun with this and meeting so many cool people that I just decided to keep going. So I'm super excited to get to know you. We usually start these with sort of your origin story, your SCA origin story. So if you can start with like where, when, and why, that would be great.
Absolutely. So found the SCA in Calontir. My oldest brother is 2 years older than I, and when I was 17, he came home from college with 2 sets of armor, his and a set to put me in. And he taught me how to throw 4 or 5 shots. And then we fought, and that was still kind of fun. And a year and a half later at college, like day 2 at college, I ran into some people. We're literally walking to the bar. They're like, blah, 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 Shire, blah, 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 SCA. I'm like, you guys are in the SCA.
You're my
and
people.
I'd already heard about it. And so I've been in the SCA since freshman year of college at Cornell College in Iowa. And I've loved it the entire time. That's really my origin. And the fighting, of course, attracted me, but really it's the friends and the friendship that keep me coming back.
So your brother basically gave you a set of armor? Is that right?
That was loaner armor. He had to take it back. But the people I met in college essentially lent me armor the first year. And by the end of the first year, I had been given armor or built armor. And my brother gave me an old helm that was super ugly. The couple years after that, when I was an RA, I had access to the storeroom. So I took a section of railroad iron in, and I made 4 helms my junior year of college, each less ugly than the last. And the 4th one I fought in for about 7 years, and it was significantly ugly. And there's probably a picture or 2 of it someplace, but I did not find one. I do not have that helm anymore. It's a relic someplace in a basement in Iowa.
But it was functional and legal.
Oh, absolutely. All of the above, and definitely better than the Franken helm that my brother gave me.
So it sounds like the college you went to had a pretty good group.
It had some fantastic people who left at the end of my freshman year. And it's also where I met, people in the group that's nearby the college, made sure that we were keeping the group within the college going. And, so for the first 2 or 3 years, I was, catching rides to events with whoever was going. Probably went to as many mid-realm events as Calontir events in the first 2 years. Junior year, my mom gave me a car rather than trading it in because they offered like $300 for it. And I went to 5 events in 4 weekends, and that was it. That I was like, this is fantastic, and never looked back.
So when you went to events and got sold on it at events, what was it outside of the fighting that sold you on the SCA?
Really hanging out with people who were accepting of their weirdness and having fun. They were, I did a little bit of theater in high school and college, very small amount, and hung out with some theater people. So they're kind of in touch with the weird side. And plenty of people in the SCA, when you run into somebody on your way to an event and they're like, wow, you're dressed funny. I'm like, you wouldn't want to go where I'm going. But when you run into somebody who's really interested, and it's the panoply and the processions, the feasts are fantastic. I'm from Calontir, so the singing is fantastic. Not my singing, but the singing. And all those things really, really drew me in. And honestly, I think I made better friends in the SCA than I made in college. I did make some good friends in college, but I think that most of my lifelong friends I made in the SCA. It's where I met my wife.
I met my husband in SCA, so I can relate. So Calontir is known for sort of melee and like the family feeling with on the warfield. So when you started fighting, did you start with multiple weapon forms, or how did you start?
Well, when I first bought Rattan, I bought enough to build like 3 different weapons, and so I started trying everything. And that's actually been a big part of my philosophy all along is if you really want to learn to fight, you should try fighting with everything against everything. And as you go around each of the weapon systems, fighting not only that weapon system against that weapon system, but against all the other ones, when you come back to one of your favorites, 1 or 2 of your favorites, you will find that you understand it better because you've fought it against all the other weapon systems.
Yeah.
In terms of Calontir being a war kingdom, I fought with the Scutum at my first Penzic. And, as soon as I had all the different weapon authorizations, I made sure to try all the different weapons, and definitely love Greatsword.
Is that your favorite?
Absolutely. So I probably have 2 favorites. Greatsword and Sword and Buckler are absolutely my favorites, but I would say Greatsword is just a little ahead.
Sword and Buckler is so much fun because you're just, well, for me anyway, you're just so outside your comfort zone that, it's there and in your face. And if you mess up, oh, well.
Yeah. I love Sword and Buckler because you can see everything. If you miss a block, you have no excuse other than, you didn't get out of the way or you didn't get your buckler in the way. And, but you can see so much, and it really encourages you to push the boundaries of what you can do. That's, I think, what I love about Sword and Buckler.
So did you go to Penzic while you were in college?
Yes, actually, the summer after my freshman year in college, I went to Penzic with my oldest brother and with 3 other people from Calontir, and we road tripped in 2 vehicles. And I think that the site fee was, like $20 or something, but we had a budget for the whole crew that included gas and cooking, because we were all on a really tight budget, and beer, everything was budgeted for, and I had so much fun. It was, today, if you say, oh yeah, I went to Penzic for about $180 once, people are going to be like, you can barely get in the door for that. And that's like gas and groceries and everything. But right. That was a little while ago. I think that was 17.
You figure out how to make it work when you don't have money. And then when you do have money, you help people who don't make it work. So
that's exactly right. And that's one of the things I love about the SCA and how inclusive we are. And it's not just about the fighting. Everything we do, people are like, oh, let me lend you this, let me give you this, and let me show you how to make a thing that you are interested in making. It's a tremendous society of sharing.
Yeah, certainly. So tell me about some of your fighting mentors as you were starting out.
Well, I had a lot of really good influences. The knight that became my knight, Schaden, was the 2nd and 11th crown of Calontir, and Sir Roger de Bayeux was one of his squire brothers and was my brother's knight. And Sir Lars Wilhelmsen, Calontir's first triple peer, was also a brother knight to Schaden. Laurel, there were a lot of good influences. I would also comment Graf Volkmar has just been a phenomenal teacher, and from very early. As a matter of fact, the very first time I remember sitting and watching Crown Tournament all the way through was the Crown Tournament that Volkmar won, and it was fantastic.
Super cool. Does your brother still play?
Not really. I
No.
did see him. So last November was the last time I saw him at an event, which of course he was at because it was his son, my nephew Matthew's knighting in the Outlands.
Oh, that's super cool.
It was fantastic. I
Wow.
we went. We took the whole family and met down there, and it was a great event. I had so much fun. It was the second longest I've driven for less than a week-long event. I was like, I almost said it's the longest I've driven. It's like, no, I drove a little bit further for an event in Eldermere.
That's cool. So how did you choose who you wanted to be your knight, or did you choose?
Oh, I absolutely did, and I actually really neglected to mention one of my other influences, Sir Alexander Blackstone, Aitenvelt knight that moved to Shadowdale, Iowa City, which is where I moved right after finishing college, and really learned a lot of really great sword and shield from him, and some thinking. But it was kind of hard, and I kind of just went with my gut. So choosing Schaden was a very good choice because I didn't know that I had some sort of Zen tendencies, and his philosophy on the flow of a fight has really stuck with me.
So did you adopt that philosophy?
Absolutely. I find if people are standing still, it's a little harder to, you have to add energy to get everything moving. But if you've got a little bit of movement going, you can turn that into something else a little more easily. And anytime I stop in the middle of a fight, it's usually a big mistake.
So how long from getting squired did it take you to get knighted?
Wow, that's a good question. Let's see. So probably 89, about 10 years. I think it was like 9 years.
And when did you get serious about fighting?
That's a good question.
After you got knighted?
That's one of the answers. Absolutely. So I always just love to fight, and I like tournaments. I like melee. I like them both. And just, finding myself one of the last people on the field was not that unusual. And so in that sense, I've always been serious about fighting because I've loved it so much. But, so my wife and I were Baron and Baroness of Three Rivers right here in St. Louis. And after we stepped down, we looked at each other and we went, hey, we can start fighting Crown now. And I'd been a knight for, at that point, 6 or 7 years. And so I started fighting in Crown. And after about a year and a half, after 3 or 4 Crown tournaments, the light bulb came on and I was like, aha, I am not going to show up at Crown tournament, have a good day and win. That's just not me. And I decided I wanted to try, that I really wanted to. And it took literally 5 or 6 years of working to improve mostly my sword and shield, but also my head game, because tournament fighting in Crown is different from just going out and putting all your energy in and having as much fun as you can. It's, setting out to win a fight, it can actually be a real drawback, and overcoming some of those obstacles took me quite a while.
So I want to come back to that because I think that's super interesting. And one of the reasons why I made the joke about like after you got knighted is because, when you look at someone's OP entry, you can kind of see some gaps, right? And I'm like, well, there's a big gap here. And I figured like something went on there. So I find that part super interesting. So we'll come back to that, but I want to talk about your knighting and
well, when you mentioned the OP, I have to give some credit to Fernando, because when Fernando and Liriel were on the Crown, and Magdalena and I were Baron and Baroness, he gave me my Torse, the AOA level award for service in Calontir. And I was like, oh, thanks. And at this time I'm a knight. I've been Knights Marshal several times. And it was was sort of like correcting an oversight. But what Fernando said to me when he gave me the scroll was, "Sorry to wreck your stick jock's resume." I had no idea that that's what my OP read like up until I got a Taurus. And then I was like, what? Oh. And so that was hilarious.
Well, it doesn't read that way anymore.
No, I know.
And the reason why I asked you before we went on if you still lived in Calontir is because you have some award from Onstioria, which looks like maybe like a friend of Onstioria or something like that.
That's correct.
Okay.
The Amicita is friend of Onstioria, and it was a tremendous honor last fall when we were at their 40th year to be surprised to be called forward and recognized as a friend of Onstioria. It's a relatively new award for their kingdom, and I do absolutely have many friends in Onstioria. It's one of the things I realized after our first reign was just how traveling to a lot of other kingdoms is tremendous fun, and it really strengthens the bonds of friendship all over the known world.
Yeah, you can meet some super cool people, and then you have friends everywhere, and that's helpful too. When you got squired, did you know you were on the path to knighthood, or was it like fighting's fun and I want somebody to teach me?
I think I thought I might be on the path, and I wasn't really worried about it, which is actually one of the best ways to
certainly
proceed. And I absolutely knew that having people teach me more than just a couple friends was going to speed things up, that I would learn better. And it helped tremendously. Although really one of the things I should mention, if for anybody who's listening who's not aware of Calontir's culture, it's really not that unusual for multiple people to give advice. There's not a strict, well, I'm the knight, you're only going to get training from me. That is counter to our culture in Calontir for the most part.
Yeah. And you mentioned a whole bunch of your mentors at the beginning, and I would assume that they stayed your mentors even after you were squired.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
I keep adding to them.
You will keep remembering people. I think that's natural. So, you mean now?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm still learning, and I if I failed to have the humility to recognize that I still had a lot to learn, I would be a little more jaded than I am now, and I might not enjoy the SCA so much. I love continuing to learn.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's continuing to learn all the time. Otherwise, it would be boring, right? Like fighting is not an easy thing. And one of my favorite quotes, my squire sent it to me, is I can't remember his name, but like this 92-year-old violin guy, and he's still practices every day. And somebody asked him why he still practices, and he said, "Well, I think I'm getting better. I'm improving." So yeah, I love that. Anyway, that was a diversion. So tell me about your path while you were a squire. Like, what kind of training did you do? How many events a month?
Wow. I honestly don't remember a whole lot of formal training. We would get together and talk. I would, fight as much as I could with my squire brothers and protege brothers and apprentice brothers and sisters, because my knight Shadman was also multiple achieved each of the peerages, and at the time I think I just kept talking to people about what worked, whether we were talking about tournament stuff or melee, and literally just talking about that as well as doing it just helped me continue to grow.
Were you like primarily focused on melee or tournament at that time?
I pretty much would fight as much as I could at any event, and I absolutely have to give a big shout out of thank you to my wife Magdalena, because when we started having children, I was like, okay, how's this going to change things? And a lot of people have children and they just evaporate, or they come back to 2 events a year or something to that effect. And I was like, so when we go to our next event, she's like, 2 weeks, we're going to Chieftains. And I mean, literally babes in arms. And in addition to that, she was just like, okay, we're at Lily's War, go fight, come back when you're done. And, so to a certain extent, I just kept fighting. And, when fighting was over, it was absolutely time to be a dad.
Right.
But it's been a phenomenal journey because of not just the mentors, but my wife and the family that we raised. At this time, I'm kind of fast forwarding things, but all 3 of my sons were made Fearedmen of Calontir, and the oldest is also a Huscarl. All 3 of them are squired, and as soon as the 3rd one was squired, I was like, oh, that's it, I'm done, which is absolutely not true, but it was fun and it was funny. And so I've really been incredibly fortunate. We actually did an interview with Duchess Catalina a month or so ago with the whole family. Well, the family is still at home, not out of kingdom. But it was a great time, and it's been a fantastic journey, and it's not over.
That's so great that your kids stayed in and they love it. I don't know if my daughter will, but what your wife gave you by letting you fight while your kids were still little is such a gift. I mean, sometimes I think people forget how much emotional labor and parenting goes on when you're training, and what a gift it is when your spouse is willing to do that for you. My husband has done it for me a ton. I traveled a ton after I had my kid, and he didn't go. So it's such a gift to have that kind of support.
There were definitely several years in a row where we all went to Lily's War, Calontir's War, as a family, camped all week, had a great time, but one or the other of us would go to Gulf Wars or to Pennsic, and that was just how it was when the kids were pretty little. And then we started taking all the kids to one or both, and it's fantastic.
Did your kids squire and stay in your lineage, or are they outside your lineage?
Oh, let's see. I have to think about that for just a second. So my oldest squired to Duke Ashir, who is in my lineage. He is, I couldn't trace it off the top of my head, but he absolutely is in not necessarily Schaden's line, but Schaden was squired to Master Broombear, who is no longer with us, but was one of the founding personalities and one of the warlord and prince of Calontir before we were a kingdom. And Ashir is in that same set of lineage. I honestly can't remember. I think he traces back to Lars's lineage. But my middle son squired to Lucian, our current crown. His Majesty Lucian is a fantastic person, and we are not in the same lineage of knights, but we are in the same lineage by chain, because the chain that I was knighted with was actually his household chain, and his, up the way earlier in his lineage. And so, we were both knighted with the same chain. And let's see, my youngest, Reinhardt, is squired to Duke Donegal. And so that is not related to my lineage. So no. But
That's
so
cool.
it was hard. I hadn't actually thought about that before. So that's an interesting one.
So you got knighted before you stepped up as a territorial baron, right?
Yes.
Okay. So were you fighting in crowns before you got knighted?
A couple times. The very first time I fought in Crown, I had very little sleep the night before and made it to the semifinals, where my head exploded and I was like, whoa, I'm in the semifinals. And I know that I was easy pickings after that because I was mentally unprepared. but I still, had a fantastic day. I would consider it was much more intermittent early on.
So, well, let's talk about your knighting then. Was your knighting a surprise?
Yes, it absolutely was.
Will you tell the story?
I'll be glad to. So, of course, my wife knew, and my oldest son was 2 at the time, and there was a melee on the field at Lily's. Lily's War was where I was knighted 22 years ago, and there was a hole between the battles, and Queen Bronwyn and King Cathan called a court, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is cool, and start looking around. I'm like, oh wait, and about the time I realized when my knight started talking, and he'd actually bowed out of the SCA to go start his own business and come back for just a few days, and all the signs were there, but it was still a complete surprise. So when he started talking, saying, Your Majesty's, beg a boon, I was like, oh, let's see. Well, and I started looking around because I had a lot of squire brothers. I'm like, well, let's see. Brendan's already been made a laurel, and Drix is already a pelican. And about the time I went, oh, that's when they called my name. And it was, I remember parts of it. I remember my brother Rolf being one of the people to put the spurs on. And when they called for, does the candidate have a sword? I went, oh, crap, I don't. And, my brother Rolf actually had one, and everything had been arranged as one would expect. But I was shocked and surprised. And our friend Theory was heralding. And at the very end, she became verklempt. And it was just at the point where she was supposed to prompt me to swear fealty. And she goes, and so I spoke from the heart the very first time I swore fealty as a knight, and it's incredibly memorable, and it was very moving. And my vigil was that night, and like many vigils I'm certain of, people came to me and said, profound things, and expressed admiration and things that I just had no expectation of. And it was humbling, and it was an amazing day.
So you kind of had an after vigil because you got knighted on the field, right? Okay.
As a matter of fact, I left out one of the most important parts of this story. So, as I said, my wife knew. She'd made the cloak in secret. And so after it was done, one of her good friends, her apprentice at the time, Mistress Maggie, leaned down because was helping watch Otmar, my oldest, and said, your daddy's a knight now. And Owen said, Daddy knight, Daddy no pawn. Because at 2, we had already been playing with all the chess pieces, and he knew the names of them and how they moved mostly. And it was great. So when I heard that story, it made me laugh really hard.
That is a great story. Wow. So after you got knighted, did things change for you in the SCA?
That's a good question. I know things did change for me after I got knighted. I just don't think that was so much a tipping point. I think I probably experienced what a lot of people experience when they get knighted, which is a rush of humility. The wow, am I really, is my prowess up to snuff? And you know that the new knights draw the absolute best fight from the people who seek them out. And so, I do recall an aspect of that humility for a year or so after, but not to a great extent. I probably got asked to teach more, which is fine. I love to teach.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're a measuring stick for everybody who's on the path.
Yeah.
Whether that's fair or not, I don't know, but that's what happens. So then you went and became a territorial baron for like 4 or 5 years.
Yep, for almost 5 years.
That's a hard job.
It is a big job, and we stayed active. It was actually a really good time in terms of the growth of our family to focus more locally because of the ages of our children. Actually, our youngest child was born while we were Baron and Baroness. And somebody approached my wife and said, well, are you going to step down? And she was like, why? And that was, it was a lot of fun. I think that we encouraged a family-friendly atmosphere and tried to make sure that parents were paying enough attention to their children so that it was fun for everybody. I know some people who were in the SCA before me who went away and came back, and some of them came back when their children were 16, 17, 18, and it would come to Lily's War with children we hadn't seen in a decade or more. And it was great to not step away, to be Baron and Baroness, and to help Three Rivers really just continue to grow and thrive. It's a tremendous and strong barony with a lot of brilliant and energetic people.
What a great opportunity for you to foster a community that was kid friendly.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize how unusual it was until afterwards.
It is unusual. I mean, our area was never, when my child was younger, was never kid friendly. We would go to things and there was nothing for her to do. So she'd be on her iPad. Like, she could do it here or she can do it at home. I don't know.
Well, and sometimes children's activities are no fun for the kids.
Right.
And that's a whole different skill set to try to grow within the SCA. But that's a challenge, for every parent that has a hobby. It's like, well, do my children come to the hobby with me? Do they stay home? How do and the good part about the SCA is that there are plenty of options if they want to come along, and or when their luggage, when they don't have an option.
When their luggage it's nice. So while culturally in Calontir, while you're a territorial baron, do you not fight in Crown? Is that a cultural thing?
So I would say it is usually, and in specific when Joe Angus and Phaedra were king and queen, and they selected us from the candidates after the interviews. He specifically said, now I don't want you, winning Crown so that I have to come back and replace you, and he gave a very stern comment, and I was like, oh, okay, won't do that. And then at one point I was invited, the Queen Ariel encouraged many people to just come and enter. And so I said, yes, I'll do this. And I told my wife I was going to do this. She goes, well, we're Baron and Baroness. I'm like, well, I guess I won't win crap. I can't not try, and it was actually the biggest head game ever. And, I really did not have a clean head game. I had a couple really clean fights early on, and I came off the field and my wife is like, and I'm like,
this was not
having a good day, and it wasn't my day, and I didn't win while I was Baron, which was probably good. So I, after that, I was like, I can't do that again. So I probably only fought in one Crown while we were Baron and Baroness.
It's interesting, Inner Kingdom anthropology wise, what the culture is, because we've had barons here who've won and they've done both at the same time. And then some people don't. And
I recall at least one, probably more than one, that essentially set the role aside, appointed a vicar or a pair of co-vicars to run the barony, delegated, and as a barony goes, the Baron and Baroness are nobility, and the seneschal's still legally in charge of the whole group. So the flexibility to do what's right for the group and what's right for the kingdom and the people involved is absolutely, there's a lot of different options at work.
So, well, let's go back to you stepped down and you've decided that, maybe Crown is something you're going to focus on. And you did the one crown and you're like, okay, I can't just go and make it happen. So what did you change about your training and work? How did you work on your mindset?
I find mindset to be a very personal thing that is different for each individual. So I reflected on that. I still do. But in terms of training, I tried to fight more. I tried to literally just win tournaments, which didn't always pan out so well for me. Fought more pickups, went to fighter practice more, and after 2 or 3 years of that, I felt like I had everything in the groove. I absolutely had a crown morning routine and a prepare my armor, make sure I've got all my weapons and gear are well maintained, so I'm unlikely to have a failure. That routine got baked out probably in the first 3 or 4 years. I think after 3 or 4 years, I really started to reflect on practice, like fighter practice or Pell work practice, which I'm not particularly fond of. I've never had a regular Pell work routine. I keep saying I'm going to start one, even like now would be a good time to do some Pell work. And I considered my fitness, both strength and aerobic. And one of the crowns I came in second place, I had upped my aerobic fitness, and I just had like unlimited energy in terms of wind. I could fight all day, and I did pickups after losing the finals of Crown, and that was good because I kind of needed it. And I kind of went through all the things, and the one that I think I left out, fighting pickups at foreign wars is one of the best places to learn new things and get advice. And one of the pieces of advice I have for anybody who's going to a foreign war is don't just go do pickups, ask for advice. Because a lot of people who are on the path will come and ask a knight or a duke or whoever they fight. But the bottom line is ask whoever you fight. When I fight pickups, I ask whoever I'm fighting, I'm like, what do you see? What do you see that I'm doing? Are you seeing something that's super easy for you to block? Whatever it is, and sometimes they're surprised to be asked. So just asking the question and listening to what they have to say, and trying to pay attention to learn what it is you're doing, whether you realize it or not. Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. Did you intentionally travel to foreign wars to get that experience?
I always loved going to the wars. After I absolutely went to the battlefield on days for good pickups, like Tuesday at Gulf Wars, Wednesday at Pennsic, and at Estrella fighting in the Grand Outlandish, and then fighting pickups. Yeah, and then fighting pickups afterwards. I had so much fun fighting at Battlemore a couple of years ago, and the tournaments and the battles and then pickups were all just top drawer. And sometimes I was having so much fun I would forget to ask for pointers. I'd be like, hey, what do you see that I'm doing that looks odd to you, or that you think is easy for you to choose what to do?
How do you sift through the information that you get from different people and decide what's relevant for you?
I'll be blunt. The very first filter is the polite face. When somebody says something that just doesn't resonate with me, I'm like, okay, I'll think about that. Sometimes it just goes straight to the sidelines. And people who are, everybody has a different mindset. That's when I mentioned head game and mindset. Everybody has their own. Whatever works for you. One thing that doesn't work for me is overtraining. Like I said, I don't have never had a regular Pell routine. I own a Pell. I've built 2. The second one I haven't worn out yet, so maybe I need to leave it outside in the rain more, like the first one. the filtering through what works, sometimes it's just a matter of trying it. Try it, and I like to say try something 3 times to see if it works, and try it at practice, try it in a tournament, try it with a friend, and try it with a stranger, because sometimes if you throw a new shot with somebody you fight with at fighter practice pretty regularly, it will be incredibly ineffective because they know you really well if you fight them regularly. But I just made that up. So you asked me how I process what's useful to me, and I'm like, I don't know. I just sort of roll with it.
I mean, you can, I guess sometimes you can just kind of tell what resonates. Like you're like, yeah, I messed that up. That's something I need to work on. But, when people have their fighting notebook and they're on their mission to fight 50 knights or whatever, like whatever that I can't remember what they called that, the night hunt or the shiv hunt, the shiv hunt. You get a lot of information, and I don't know if all of it is helpful. Like I always tell people, if you're going to want feedback, you should ask before we start fighting so that I know, because otherwise I'm not going to be looking for what you want me to look for, probably, because
Yep.
Because if you don't ask people beforehand, sometimes they'll just tell you something, and I've sat around with people, I didn't know what to tell them, so I just said whatever, and I'm like, well, that's not helpful. You should just said I don't know. But I don't know. That's why I asked, because I'm just like, well, there's got to be some way to filter through it, and I wondered how you did it.
Well, when you hear advice and it makes sense, and that's when it resonates with you, it absolutely is something that's going to stick. And sometimes you give advice to a fighter who doesn't have a framework to plug it into yet. So, one of the things a lot of people come back to is, make sure you keep getting more stick time, but also get some reflection time to figure out what you're doing. And when you run into somebody that their philosophy, like flow or setting up a shot or whatever they say, that's like, oh, that I do that, that's me, then try to make sure that you understand and have a dialogue with them so that you can not just hear what they do, but learn how to think better about what it is that you're doing. Duke Sean came and taught more than one, but he came and taught a class, Duke Sean from Artemisia, in our
you only have to say Duke Sean, everyone knows.
Yeah, I was pretty sure. And I think the second time he did it, my squire at the time, Damien, dragged me along, and it was really good. But a lot of the things he said early on resonated a lot, because it's a framework. It's not this isn't going to teach you 16 trick shots that don't plug in and they may or may not work. And that's actually a phrase my oldest brother told me when we'd each been fighting for he'd been fighting for 7 years. I've been fighting for about 5. He's like, yeah, I'm out at the bag of tricks. I've used the entire bag of tricks. He's like, there's nothing left but to get better. And, there's a lot of different frameworks and methodologies, and they've gotten a lot better, and they're so much more accessible now. People teach, there's videos about how they think about setting up a shot and throwing a shot. Duke Sean joined the Forgotten City, the Kansas City Wednesday night fighter practice for a session on stick mechanics that was, it's the core of some of what he teaches, and a lot of it's mindset. I used to teach physics, so sometimes I'll stop and say, okay, now think about how you're moving the sword, because you have to do work on the sword. And if you move the center of mass of the sword in a shorter arc, if you move it in a wide arc, you have to spend more energy to move it through that wider arc. And if you move the center of mass through a narrower arc, the tip of the sword can still go way everywhere, but you can be more efficient with your shots. And that's integral to how I think about improving. And when I get lazy or slack, then my shots get sloppier and I spend more energy. When I'm more in practice and when I'm focused, when both those things are happening, then I can be incredibly efficient, and I can, still have enough attention left to be thinking about half a shot ahead or maybe a full shot ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that you have a before Crown Day ritual. Is that the same ritual before every tournament, or is Crown special?
Well, Crown is really what refined it and boiled it down for me, because it's as Duke Garrick has said, Crown Tournament is the crucible of honor, and you want to do your best. You want, in many cases, you want to win. You may not. I have found that if you go in expecting to win, that can be a burden to overcome. But finding the mindset where I want to have an extremely good day and I would like to win is actually the thing that works for me. And so making sure that I don't have distractions, like, oh, I forgot to fix this strap. That's a distraction. That's a distraction up here. Will the strap break? Nah, it's going to make it through today, but I'm going to wish I'd fixed it last weekend. And so that builds into the ritual. And, getting a good night's sleep can be hard depending on how far you drive. I developed a tendency to just book a hotel instead of crashing at somebody's house. If I'm, serious about fighting in Crown, I'm probably staying at a hotel and I'm probably asleep by about 11:30. Eating a breakfast that's not too small and not too big is important. And then making sure I stretch a little and try to get some warm-up fights in with somebody who is not fighting in Crown is usually the core. Those are the bare bones of the routine. There's a little more that I'm not thinking of right now, but that's the essence of it. And I would say it does pertain to other tournaments that I really feel like I want to go deliver my best fight at, as opposed to just showing up and having fun. I will try to put some of those elements into that day as well.
How do you keep yourself in the right mindset throughout the day? Like, are you one of those people that needs to be alone, or do you fight pickups between rounds?
It varies.
Okay.
I do sometimes fight pickups between rounds. If a tournament is kind of long, our Toys for Tots has, it's not unusual for it to have more than 100 fighters. I know in some kingdoms that's like just a normal tournament, but here that's a pretty good sized tournament in Calontir, and so there might be a long wait between rounds, even if they're running 4 fields to keep the tree moving forward. And a couple of years ago at Toys for Tots, I found myself really, plenty of energy, amped up, still pumped up from the previous fight. I knew who my opponent was. I knew what weapons we were going to be fighting with. And I literally started pacing back and forth and bouncing a little just to keep the blood pumping, because I didn't want to sit down. I didn't want to cool down. I didn't want any of that to happen. I just wanted to keep it going. So it really depends. On the other side of that coin, sometimes, I'll come off the field, take the helmet and gauntlets off, and have a sip of water and sit down and just have a quiet moment, talk with friends, ignore friends. That varies widely. Sometimes I want to joke and laugh, and other times I want to focus not on the fights behind me, but what's going on in the field, because I might meet that person.
So you just sort of pay attention to what your needs are that day.
Yeah. And actually, my wife and I talked about that. And one of the things that we found out going to Crown Tournament was that one of the things that helped her was for her to have somebody to talk to that wasn't me, because maybe I'd talk to her, but maybe I wouldn't. And that was terrible.
That's hard for her.
Yeah.
What role does she play for you on tourney day?
Well, absolutely. She's my inspiration. 24/7, 365 days a year. I would say she is all kinds of supportive. When sometimes on a weekday, in normal days when there's fighter practice, I really won't care about going to fighter practice. And each of my sons has done this for me, and my wife has done this for me, where it's like, oh, just go, pack your armor. Come on, let's go. We're going to meeting. I don't care if you choose not to put your armor on and fight. And by the time we get there, I'm ready. I'm going to put my armor on. I fight. I have fun. And recognizing that outwardly has helped me to really choose it intentionally instead of being, do I want to go to fighting practice? And so, I mean, she's probably my biggest fan.
That's kind of amazing. Like a couple of people have said that. I think maybe Uther said that, he'll, even when he's not feeling it, he'll be like, I have to go and I'll fight 3 fights. Maybe it wasn't Uther. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Miles. And usually when you get there and you get your armor on and you fight a couple, you're like, yeah, I love this. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, why does it take so much effort to get off the couch, right? But it's nice that your wife supports you that way and is able to know that's what you need.
Well, and honestly, she's done so much our entire SCA career. I mean, she makes the garb I wear. She makes me new fighting shirts when I rip them, and I guarantee you I rip fighting shirts because everybody does there. And the very first tent we sewed together wasn't her first tent, but it was my first tent and our first tent that wasn't a modern tent. And it's boundless, the number of things she's done to make our SCA better.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's cool. You guys made a tent. I've never made a tent, so
she's made. I don't know how many she's made. It's maybe a dozen.
It scares me a little bit to have something that big. So the crowns that you won, were they sword and shield, or did you fight your great sword?
Both. In both of the crowns that I won, I won one fight with those. So our Calontir's crowns are best 2 out of 3 in the finals. That's written in our kingdom law. And the custom is that the crown will ask each of the combatants to choose a weapon system. Both times that I won, I picked greatsword, and my opponent picked sword and shield. Once the order was reversed in both of those, but both times I actually won in 2 fights. The third fight sometimes is a different negotiation for what weapon system people are going to choose. But I absolutely, as a matter of fact, he said to bring a sword, so I brought a greatsword. Excellent.
What kind of shield do you use?
So I use a center grip heater, and I don't have that here in the house. It is with one of my favorite shield paint. I can't say my favorite artist. My favorite artist is my wife. But one of her apprentices, Violet Sinclair, is repainting my shield because she's got time and she's got interest and she's fantastic at it. She did my shield like just a couple months before the first time I won crown. and then covered it up with the kingdom colors. But she's a fantastic artist, and so I don't have that here in the house right now, but I fight with center grip heater or buckler, and I have fought in crown tournament with buckler in earnest.
Cool. Yeah, that's fun. So how did it feel different for you? Like you said, the crown, before you won your first one, you came in second, right?
Yes, I actually came in second 3 crowns in a row.
Okay. So how did the one that you win feel different than those 3 for you?
I was absolutely more centered, more focused, and I that there were some crowns where I didn't come in second. After the 3 in a row, I didn't win one after that. I had a couple others where I didn't make it to the finals, didn't make it to the semifinals. And I really had an experience of pushing too hard and dumping energy into the fight when what I needed was a little bit more attention and a little bit more precision. So I think that's what learning that, having some bad crown tournaments and really resetting myself, it helped my head game, helped me improve my precision. I think Duke Anton gave me the advice to add some shot diversity. And so I'm still working on that today. I want more shot diversity. Don't we all?
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about reining, because we haven't really talked about that at all. And we're actually almost coming up on an hour already. So I feel bad. I don't want to cut the reining part short. What's your favorite part about reining?
Honestly, both coronations were fantastic, and putting my wife next to me and reigning together side by side both times and really trying to do a good job for the kingdom has been, one of the best experiences. The outpouring of generosity and joy, and really the respect that's given to the crown. I just try to earn that each time, because it's tremendous. And reigning side by side with Magdalena was absolutely fantastic. One of the other things that was fun, each of our reigns, we actually went to Europe for an event. The first reign was Insula Draconis's first coronet tournament. They'd been a principality for a while with Vickers, and they had a principality tournament with the prince. And I was like, hey, we've got a couple days free. Let's go for their first coronet tournament. And a friend of ours was over there and picked us up and gave us a ride, and we took gifts. And that's actually probably my favorite part of all, is giving generously from the artisans of our kingdom, because the artisans provide, and we get to say, hey, look at this really cool thing, I hope you like it. It was made by so and so, and it's fantastic. So that's some of my favorite parts.
That's cool. What's your favorite tradition in Calontir?
I'm gonna have to go with singing. I have always loved the singing. I still enjoy singing. I used to sing our children to sleep. They wouldn't necessarily fall asleep, but I think they would stay in bed. If they crawled out of bed when they were little, they were like, no, you have to stay in bed. Okay, I'll sing a song if you stay in bed. And that's probably my absolute favorite tradition. It's one of the things that attracted me to the SCA, because the songs are stories, and the stories are interesting. They capture you in ways that, books and songs truly capture your heart and mind.
The only Penzic I ever went to, I was retinue for our king at the time, and we camped right across from Calontir. And what floored me, because it's not an Ontarian thing, is you guys camp out in your royal pavilion, and it's like a living room, and you sing and you hang out and you eat, and all together like you're a family, and it's super cool.
Absolutely. One of the best things about Penzic, and really any of the foreign wars, is I don't need to pack a shade fly, because I have a tent to sleep in, and we have the purple pavilion. That's the family room.
Right. Yeah, it's a really neat dynamic that not all kingdoms have. It's pretty cool. So do you think you'd want to reign again?
I would like to. I fought in the last crown tournament, and I made it to the semifinals. And I do have a fitness routine that's not quite as good as it should be right now, but I think it would be a lot of fun to reign again. And honestly, our second reign, we followed Lucian and Kana, Lucian's first reign, and he's our crown right now. And Lucian and Tamar are doing a fantastic job in these really difficult times. And I would love to follow them.
Cool. You said Damien was your squire. Is that Damien McGavin?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I've met him. He came up to Seattle once and came to our fight practice. He's a good guy.
He's great.
Yeah, and he's a duke now too, right?
Yes, he is. Well, actually, so here's another favorite. I was thinking about things. the day he was knighted, he gave me a gift. And he's like, this is a bag, and he sewed the bag by hand. But the thing that really made it special was when he told me that this black belt that's part of the bag was the belt he wore as a man-at-arms that was replaced by the squire belt. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
And yeah, he's a really good guy.
What a thoughtful gift.
Yeah.
Super thoughtful. All right. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you would really like to talk about?
Oh, I love my wife. Actually, so my wife is fantastic in so many ways. But one of the things that she sometimes, she's also a really good photographer. So there's more pictures of me and my sons than there are of her and our sons. And so another shout out to her is probably appropriate. I can't think of anything else. I just came ready to answer any question you wanted to ask.
Okay. Oh, I just, I thought I'd ask. She sounds amazing. Like I think sometimes people forget how much behind the scenes support there is for super successful fighters. And I love it when you guys give a shout out to your partners. And
she also makes hats. This
is that's cool. Is that a bicotic kit? Or?
It is a bicocket made by hand felted, and it is amazing.
That's cool. So she hand felts it and shapes it.
Oh yes.
Excellent. I'm going to point some people in her direction because somebody was just asking us how to do that. And I'm like, I don't know.
She does a lot of things very well.
Let's look at your killing tool.
Oh, okay. So I did bring the boring sword. This is just a windrose
boring sword
basket, 36-inch stick. The great sword is fundamentally the best weapon in melee, and it's mathematically provable because it's got more linear inches of killing striking edge than any other weapon on the field, unless you consider the people who make 7.5-foot polearms that look like greatswords, and those are just mock greatswords, so therefore it just proves my point. I like a balance point about a hand in front of the keons. We used to have a 18-inch limit on where the keons are. That's gone away when half sorting became legal. For me, the balance point is more important than the overall weight, but too heavy and too light are still problems. I use a windrose, formerly Mandrake, scent stopper style pewter pommel weight. And I find the brass to be just a little too heavy and the aluminum be just a little too light.
What do you make your keons out of?
The keons, these haven't changed the entire time. They're heater hose.
Okay.
So you can buy this at like a Lowe's or a Menards or a Home Depot. And when I can't find it in black, I just make sure I wrap it completely with tape. And I usually have the ends wrapped as well, but obviously I've been using this one and I haven't retaped the end.
Do you like that better than the metal because it doesn't mess with where your balance point is?
That's part of it. It helps keep the weight of the pommel has more effect when there's no metal here. I also don't like a rigid keon. And the ways of attaching a metal keon, some people are like, yeah, just put a screw in it. And it's like, does that weaken the rattan? I've never found a metal keon I liked. I think I may have tried to put one on a greatsword one time and just gave it up.
Do you do anything special with your taping or your thrusting tip, or is it pretty standard?
I mean, I actually use the exact same methodology on single swords as on the greatsword. And I'm about to run out of, I don't think I have it handy. I'm about to run out of the foam that I use, and I'll probably have to just go back to commercial black foam or something. I use strapping tape, vertical, and athletic tape. So I think the athletic tape holds up a little better than duct tape on the end, although it doesn't stick as well. So the athletic tape comes all the way down here and is held in place with duct tape. But I think it holds up a little better for a tip.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for showing us that. Let's do the final 10. We do like, I don't know if you've ever watched one of these all the way through, but
I started to, and I got interrupted. So
Okay.
I'm a clean slate.
All right. So that's nice. It'll be all surprises for you. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
I keep flashing back to people I have fought, and I love fighting Duke Sean and Ailenon. I had some fantastic passes with Duke Craven, a couple of at an Estrella and a Penzik. Anyone of that, anybody. Right now, I'd fight anybody.
Right now, anybody. Okay. Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
Wow, that's a really fantastic question. I'm gonna use one of. So we have a lot of people who would do a fabulous job, and you could just review our previous crown list, and you'd see 10 people, 20 people, 10 couples that would do a fantastic job. Honestly, I'd love to see Volkmar reign again.
Cool. If you could talk fighting with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
Oh, only an hour.
Well, okay. 2 hours?
No. I'd say I'd love to spend a whole hour talking with Duke Sean again.
Cool. What is your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
Well, I remember when I showed my children Highlander, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. It's just not as awesome as I remember it being.
It doesn't hold up, does it?
No, it doesn't. A Lion in Winter.
That's a good one.
It's 1183. We all have knives. It's 1183, and we're all barbarians. They knew.
If you could add a rule or subtract a rule from the rules of the list, what would it be?
Wow. I don't know.
Okay. That's legit.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite tournament format?
Oh, Swiss 5, or better yet, a multiple skills. I fought at Grimfell's, had a tournament, their March Warden tournament, where they had 5 different rounds, and one was single combat tournament, and one was 3-man melee, and one was archery, and one round was thrown weapons. And I think one year they had equestrian, but they mix it up every time. And the multiple methods is absolutely one of my favorites. It really draws out the well-rounded fighters, and I just like playing with all the weapons.
What did you call it?
A Swiss 5?
Swiss 5. That sounds fun.
I mean, a Swiss 5 is typically a little more structured, even though there's a lot of variations within a Swiss 5. But the one where they mixed in thrown weapons as one round of the tournament, and 3-person melees as one round of the tournament, or a warlord, I don't remember. They varied it year over year. Was just fantastic. It was like an entire day of fighting that had multiple formats.
Super cool. That sounds like fun. What's your favorite event?
Lily's War. Hands down, Lily's War. It has been some of the most fun I've had ever, and always. I mean, I got knighted there. We take our. I literally have not missed a Lily's War since I started going. I've been to Lily's 4 and everything since. This is the longest I've gone without going to a Lily's War. In terms of fantastic events, though, I went to Duke Finvar's event in Eldermere several years ago, probably a decade ago, and that was phenomenal. It was an incredibly medieval experience. What's
that called? Do you remember?
No. I have a pin from it on one of my other hats.
Is Lily's the event that you would suggest to somebody that if they wanted to go to an event in Calontir to go to?
I highly recommend it. If you're from far away, come to Lily's War. There's a lot going on. You can't do everything every day because there's so many classes being taught. There's there's a lot to do, and I absolutely would recommend Lily's War.
Excellent. Excellent. If you could have any helmet in the world, regardless of cost, what kind would it be?
Well, I really like my Barbute, but I might try an Armé that was perfect.
What do you have, like a T-face Barbute? Or
Yes, it's got a bar. It's not a 100% medieval T-face, so it's got one bar this way and one bar that way, so it's got a slightly wider eye slot. T-Bone from the Outlands designed it.
I love those Barbutes. They're so beautiful. If I ever went late period, I would probably get a Y face, but they're so pretty.
Well, and I went from a ugly helm that I made to a less ugly helm that I could afford to the Barbute, and so I've been fighting it for a long time, and it's fantastic protection.
Perfect. It's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do?
I drank a little too late. I'm hoarse because it's dry, and I was drinking and talking, and sometimes when your voice gets a little hoarse, you just drink a little more. So I'm hungover. And I think I drank for about 4 hours, but really it was more like 11.
8, but 11's better.
Yeah, there's a longer version of that story.
Who's your favorite fight ever?
Whew. Wow, that's tough. There are a lot of people. Honestly, I think that some of my passes with Volkmar have been my absolute favorite ever. We used to do pickups after Toys for Tots on days when neither one of us are still in. As soon as we're both out, we're outside doing pickup fights. And the very first time that Volkmar said, "How did you do that? Where you hit me over here?" I was like, I've just made it a whole level up the mountain, because I wasn't quite sure how I did it, but I had been asking him that question for a couple decades.
Yes, that's such a surreal moment when one of your mentors asks you how you did something. You're like, really?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite person to watch fight?
Lots of people. So Morgan Black Dragon from Monstiora is a phenomenal fight with a great sword, and so sometimes it just makes me too tired fighting him I just always enjoy watching him. So he's one of my favorite people to watch fight. I love it when he comes up to our Valor tournament. Sir Derek from here in Kingdom, although he's traveled lots of places, he's been and so many people. That everybody whose name I mentioned are people I love to fight.
And then the last question: who is the cleanest fighter in your kingdom?
Wow, just giving me
the hard one. I know.
That's a tough one.
You can pass.
Yeah.
Everybody's and you're having a hard time.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good question. I'm gonna have to think about that.
All right. Well, you can always add it in the comments later. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate. I've had a really fun time talking to you and learning a little bit about your story. I appreciate it. Just really appreciate your time.
It's an honor being asked. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to Duke Morgan of the Oaks from Aytonville, and now he lives in Calontir. So that should be interesting. He's 2nd gen, so he won't have an origin story that we're used to hearing. So it should be fun. All right, thanks again, and see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.